Mount Horeb, 850 BCE. Deep inside a cave, a man lies curled on the stone floor. He hasn't eaten in days, hasn't spoken to anyone in weeks. His clothes are torn. His face is streaked with dust and dried tears. This is not what you'd expect from one of the most powerful prophets in biblical history. This is Elijah the Tishbite, and he wants to die. "I have had enough, Lord," he whispers into the darkness. "Take my life. I am no better than my ancestors." 6 weeks ago, this same man stood before 850 false prophets and called down fire from heaven. He humiliated the entire religious establishment of Israel. He proved, beyond any doubt, that the God of Abraham was real and Baal was nothing. It was the greatest spiritual victory in Israel's history. And now he's hiding in a cave, begging God to let him die. What happened? How does someone go from the mountaintop of faith to the pit of despair in just 40 days? To understand that, we need to go back 3 years, to the moment when Elijah first appeared. Because this prophet's story isn't just about miracles and fire from heaven. It's about what happens when faith collides with fear, when divine calling meets human weakness, when God asks the impossible from someone who feels completely inadequate. This is the story of Elijah, the man who stood alone against a kingdom, the prophet who performed miracles while battling depression, the servant who heard God not in earthquake or fire, but in a whisper, and the only human being in Scripture who never died. Samaria, 875 BCE. 3 years before the cave, King Ahab sits on his throne discussing trade routes with foreign ambassadors. The palace is magnificent, gold everywhere, servants attending to every need, power radiating from every corner. Then the doors burst open. A man walks in. No appointment, no introduction, no royal protocol. He wears rough clothing made of camel hair, a leather belt around his waist. His hair is wild. His face is weathered by sun and wind. He looks like he just walked out of the wilderness, which he did. The guards move to stop him, but something in his eyes makes them hesitate. Authority, absolute certainty, the kind of presence that doesn't need permission. He walks straight to the throne, looks Ahab directly in the face, and speaks. "As the Lord, the God of Israel, lives, before whom I stand, there shall be neither dew nor rain these years except by my word." That's it. 11 seconds, 1 sentence. Then he turns and walks out. Ahab is stunned. Who was that? What just happened? But before he can respond, the prophet is gone, vanished into the wilderness as suddenly as he appeared. The king laughs it off. Some crazy hermit, religious fanatic, ignore him. But Jezebel doesn't laugh, because she recognizes what just happened. This wasn't a prediction, it was a declaration of war. One man, speaking in the name of a God she's been trying to erase, just cursed the entire kingdom. And here's what makes Elijah's appearance so shocking. We know almost nothing about him before this moment. No genealogy, no training period, no backstory. He just appears, fully formed, absolutely certain, speaking with authority that cannot be ignored. The text simply calls him Elijah the Tishbite, from Tishbe in Gilead. That's it. We don't know his father's name, don't know his age, don't know how God called him or when he became a prophet. He's a nobody, from nowhere, speaking to the most powerful king in Israel. And he's about to prove that God's nobodies are more powerful than the world's somebodies. After delivering his message, Elijah doesn't stick around for applause. God tells him to go east, hide by the Cherith Brook, wait there. So he does. The brook is east of the Jordan River, remote, isolated, no cities nearby, no people, just rocks, water, and wilderness. Elijah camps beside the stream, drinks from it, and waits. But there's a problem. How is he supposed to eat? There's no food out here, no villages, no crops. He can't exactly go into town and buy supplies. The moment Ahab's soldiers spot him, he's dead. Then something extraordinary happens. Ravens come, not just once, twice every day, morning and evening. They bring bread and meat, drop it beside him, then fly away. Ravens, scavenger birds, considered unclean by Jewish law, bringing food to a prophet. For months, this continues. Every morning, every evening. Bread and meat delivered by birds. Meanwhile, in Samaria, the sky remains cloudless. Weeks pass. No rain. Farmers watch their crops wither. Wells begin drying up. Streams slow to trickles. Ahab sends search parties. Find that prophet. Bring him here. Make him reverse this curse. But they can't find him. Elijah has disappeared. And Baal, the supposed storm god, the deity Jezebel has been promoting as all-powerful, silent. Completely, utterly, embarrassingly silent. Months turn into a year. The drought intensifies. Livestock begin dying. Famine spreads. And still no rain. Jezebel's prophets perform their rituals, offer sacrifices, chant prayers to Baal, plead for rain. Nothing. Before we continue, if you're finding this story compelling, help this channel grow by leaving a like. And if you want more biblical narratives told this way, subscribe and turn on notifications. It really helps me bring these stories to you. All right, back to the wilderness. After more than a year beside Cherith Brook, the water begins to dry up. Even this remote stream isn't immune to the drought. The flow decreases daily. Then it becomes a trickle, then mud, then nothing. Elijah has a problem. No water means death. Even with the ravens bringing food, he can't survive without water. Then God speaks again. Go to Zarephath. Stay there. I have commanded a widow to feed you. Wait. Zarephath? That's in Sidon, Phoenician territory, Jezebel's homeland. The very place where Baal worship is strongest. God is sending his prophet into enemy territory, and not just anywhere in Sidon. To a widow. Widows in ancient culture had no resources, no income, no security. They were among the poorest and most vulnerable people in society. God's provision plan seems insane. Send the prophet to a starving widow in a foreign land, during a famine, in the middle of drought. But Elijah goes. He arrives at Zarephath exhausted, thirsty, hungry. At the town gate, he sees a woman gathering sticks. He calls to her, "Please bring me a little water in a jar so I may have a drink." As she turns to get it, he adds, "And bring me, please, a piece of bread." The woman stops, turns back, and her response reveals just how desperate the situation has become. "As surely as the Lord your God lives, I don't have any bread, only a handful of flour in a jar and a little oil in a jug. I am gathering a few sticks to take home and make a meal for myself and my son, that we may eat it and die." Read that again. She's gathering wood to cook one final meal. Then she and her son will starve to death. She's not being dramatic. She's stating a fact. The famine has reached even here, in Jezebel's homeland, where Baal is supposedly king. Elijah looks at this dying woman and speaks words that make no logical sense. "Don't be afraid. Go home and do as you have said. But first make a small loaf of bread for me from what you have and bring it to me, and then make something for yourself and your son." Wait. First make bread for me? She just said she has enough for one final meal for her and her dying child, and the prophet is asking her to give it to him first? It seems cruel, selfish, impossible. But then Elijah adds the promise. "For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. The jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry until the day the Lord sends rain on the land." The widow faces an impossible choice. Believe this foreign prophet and risk her son's life on a promise, or ignore him and accept certain death. She chooses faith. She goes home, takes her handful of flour, her small amount of oil, makes bread, gives it to Elijah first, then makes some for herself and her son. And the next morning, when she checks the jar, it's still full. The oil jug hasn't decreased. She makes breakfast, uses flour and oil, checks again, still full. Day after day, week after week, month after month. The flour doesn't run out. The oil doesn't run dry. 3 people eat daily from a supply that should have been exhausted in one meal. This widow, living in the land where Baal is worshipped as the provider, experiences firsthand that the God of Israel is the real sustainer. Elijah stays with her. Days become weeks. Weeks become months. The drought continues. But inside this small house, there's abundance. Then tragedy strikes. The widow's son becomes ill. The sickness gets worse. His breathing becomes labored. And then he stops breathing. He dies. The widow, who has been providing for God's prophet, who has seen daily miracles in her flour jar, now holds her dead son, and she turns on Elijah with rage and grief. "What do you have against me, man of God? Did you come to remind me of my sin and kill my son?" Her faith shatters. The miracle wasn't enough. She gave her last meal. God provided. And now her son is dead anyway. Elijah doesn't argue. He doesn't explain. He simply says, "Give me your son." He takes the dead boy upstairs to his room, lays him on the bed, and then does something remarkable. He cries out to God, "Lord my God, have you brought tragedy even on this widow I am staying with by causing her son to die?" Then he stretches himself out on the boy 3 times and cries out, "Lord my God, let this boy's life return to him." And God hears. The boy's life returns. He breathes, opens his eyes, lives. Elijah carries him downstairs and gives him back to his mother. "Look, your son is alive." This widow, this foreigner, this woman from Baal's territory now declares, "Now I know that you are a man of God, and that the word of the Lord from your mouth is the truth." For nearly 3 years Elijah lives here, hidden, sustained, while outside the famine devastates the land. Ahab searches desperately. Jezebel's fury grows. The prophets of Baal continue their useless rituals. And then, in the 3rd year, God speaks again. "Go and present yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain on the land." It's time. The confrontation can no longer be delayed. The moment of truth has arrived. Elijah returns to Israel. The journey takes days. When he's close to Samaria, he encounters Obadiah, the palace administrator. Obadiah is a faithful believer who has been hiding 100 prophets in caves, feeding them at great personal risk. When Obadiah sees Elijah, he falls on his face. "Is it really you, my lord Elijah?" "Yes," Elijah replies. "Go tell your master, Elijah is here." Obadiah is terrified. Ahab has been searching every nation and kingdom for Elijah. Now the prophet just appears and wants a meeting? This could get Obadiah killed. But Elijah insists, "As the Lord Almighty lives whom I serve, I will surely present myself to Ahab today." The meeting happens. Ahab sees Elijah and his first words drip with accusation. "Is that you, you troubler of Israel?" Notice the blame shift. The king who married a pagan princess, who built temples to Baal, who permitted the slaughter of God's prophets, calls Elijah the troubler. Elijah doesn't flinch. "I have not made trouble for Israel, but you and your father's family have. You have abandoned the Lord's commands and have followed the Baals." Then he issues a challenge that will change everything. "Now summon the people from all over Israel to meet me on Mount Carmel, and bring the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table." Mount Carmel, a mountain on the Mediterranean coast, visible for miles, the perfect stage for a public test. Ahab, surprisingly, agrees. Perhaps he thinks his prophets will win. Perhaps he's desperate for rain and willing to try anything. Perhaps he sees political advantage. Whatever his reasoning, word goes out. All Israel is summoned. The prophets of Baal and Asherah are gathered. 850 religious professionals versus one wild prophet from the wilderness. The confrontation we mentioned in our video about Jezebel is about to happen. But now, you'll see it through Elijah's eyes. Mount Carmel. High noon, the mountain is packed with people. All of Israel has gathered. It's the ultimate showdown between the God of Abraham and the God of Jezebel. Elijah stands alone on one side. 850 prophets crowd the other side. The contrast is visual, overwhelming, impossible. One man against an army. Elijah addresses the crowd first. His words cut through the noise. How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him. The people say nothing. They've been wavering for so long, they've forgotten what it means to choose. Compromise has become their religion. Both and instead of either or. Elijah continues. I am the only one of the Lord's prophets left, but Baal has 450 prophets. Get 2 bulls for us. Let Baal's prophets choose one for themselves, and let them cut it into pieces and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. I will prepare the other bull and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. Then you call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord. The God who answers by fire, he is God. The crowd responds, what you say is good. The terms are simple. 2 altars, 2 sacrifices, no human fire. Whichever God sends fire from heaven wins. Baal's prophets go first. They prepare their bull, place it on the altar, and begin calling on Baal. Baal, answer us. Morning passes. They dance around the altar. They chant. They plead. Baal, answer us. Nothing happens. The sun climbs higher. Noon arrives. They've been at this for 6 hours. No fire, no smoke, no response. Elijah starts mocking them. His taunts are brutal. Shout louder. Surely he is a god. Perhaps he is deep in thought or busy or traveling. Maybe he is sleeping and must be awakened. The crowd starts murmuring. The prophets become frantic. They shout louder. They dance more wildly. Then they take swords and spears and slash themselves. Blood flows down their bodies. This is the ultimate desperation, cutting themselves to get their God's attention. The afternoon wears on. 3 more hours, blood everywhere, screaming, pleading, begging. Silence from heaven, not a spark, not a flicker, nothing. Finally, evening approaches. 9 hours of ritual, 9 hours of prayer, 9 hours of sacrifice and bloodshed. And Baal has not answered, has not appeared, has not sent even a whisper of response. The prophets collapse in exhaustion and shame. It's over. Their God has failed them completely and publicly. Now it's Elijah's turn. He calls the people closer. Come here to me. They gather around. He takes 12 stones, 1 for each tribe of Israel. A visual reminder. You are one people, united under one God. He builds an altar, arranges the wood, cuts the bull and places it on top. Then he does something that seems insane. Fill 4 large jars with water and pour it on the offering and on the wood. Water? In the middle of a 3-year drought? Where did they even find water? But they do it. 4 jars, poured over the sacrifice. Do it. Again, Elijah says. They pour 4 more jars. Do it a 3rd time. 4 more jars. 12 jars total. The altar is drenched. Water runs down and fills the trench around the altar. This isn't just about proving God can send fire. It's about proving he can send fire even when every natural condition makes it impossible. The wood is soaked. The sacrifice is soaked. The stones are soaked. Everything is designed to not burn. Then Elijah prays, not for 9 hours, not with shouting and cutting, just a simple, direct prayer. Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, Let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant and have done all these things at your command. Answer me, Lord, answer me, so these people will know that you, Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again. 60 seconds, that's all, one simple prayer of faith. Then fire falls, not a small flame, not a gradual ignition, fire from heaven, consuming the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, the soil, even the water in the trench, everything, incinerated in an instant. The people see it and fall on their faces. The Lord, He is God! The Lord, He is God! The chant spreads. 850 false prophets humiliated. Thousands of witnesses. One undeniable miracle. God has answered. Baal has been proven powerless. The spiritual war has been won. Elijah seizes the moment. Seize the prophets of Baal. Don't let anyone get away. They're captured. All of them. And Elijah has them executed at the Kishon Valley. It's brutal, necessary. The spiritual cancer must be removed. Then Elijah tells Ahab, "Go, eat and drink, for there is the sound of a heavy rain." Ahab obeys. But Elijah climbs to the top of Carmel, bends down to the ground, puts his face between his knees, and prays for rain. He tells his servant, "Go and look toward the sea." The servant goes, returns. There is nothing there. "Go back," Elijah says, 7 times. The servant checks 7 times. 6 times nothing. On the 7th time, the servant reports, "A cloud as small as a man's hand is rising from the sea." That's all Elijah needs. "Go and tell Ahab, hitch up your chariot and go down before the rain stops you." Within minutes, the sky goes black. Wind picks up. Heavy rain begins to fall. The 3-year drought breaks. The miracle is complete. The story in our video about Jezebel continued with her threatening Elijah's life. But this is where his story takes its most human turn. This incredible day of victory becomes the setup for his greatest crisis. Because sometimes, our darkest moments come right after our greatest triumphs. This story is getting intense, and we're only halfway through. If you're hooked and want more people to discover these biblical narratives, share this video with a friend who loves history or faith stories. And drop a comment. What would you have felt standing on Mount Carmel that day? I read every comment. Now, let's see what happens after the victory. You would expect Elijah to be on top of the world. He just performed the greatest miracle in Israel's history, called down fire from heaven, broke a 3-year drought, proved God's supremacy, destroyed false religion. He should be celebrating, leading revival, riding a wave of spiritual momentum. Instead, he's running for his life. Because Jezebel sends him a message, 1 sentence. "May the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow I do not make your life like that of one of them." She's going to kill him, just like he killed her prophets. And Elijah, the man who just stood fearlessly before 850 prophets, who called down fire, who executed false prophets without hesitation, panics. He runs, not to Samaria to confront her, not to rally the people who just witnessed God's power. He runs away, south, fast, desperate. He travels a day's journey into the wilderness, sits down under a broom tree, and prays a prayer that reveals his complete emotional collapse. "I have had enough, Lord. Take my life. I am no better than my ancestors." This is depression, deep, crushing, overwhelming depression. The spiritual high of Mount Carmel has crashed into the darkest valley, and Elijah wants to die. Here's what makes this so profound. God doesn't rebuke him, doesn't tell him to toughen up, doesn't give a lecture about faith. Instead, God sends an angel. The angel touches Elijah and says, "Get up and eat." Elijah looks around. There's bread baking on, hot coals, a jar of water. Simple provision. The angel doesn't explain, doesn't counsel, just provides food and lets Elijah rest. Elijah eats, drinks, lies down again, sleeps. The angel comes a second time, touches him. Get up and eat, for the journey is too much for you. Notice God's gentleness. He's not pushing Elijah to perform. He's nourishing him, preparing him, strengthening him for what's ahead. Elijah eats again, and strengthened by that food, he travels 40 days and 40 nights until he reaches Horeb, the mountain of God. The same mountain where Moses received the 10 Commandments, where God revealed himself in fire and smoke and trumpet blasts. Elijah finds a cave, crawls inside, and stays there. Then the word of the Lord comes to him. "What are you doing here, Elijah?" It's not an angry question. It's an invitation. Tell me what you're feeling. Why are you here instead of in Israel? And Elijah's answer pours out, all his frustration, all his loneliness, all his fear. "I have been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant, torn down your altars, and put your prophets to death with the sword. I am the only one left, and now they are trying to kill me too." He feels alone, forgotten, like his work meant nothing, like he's fighting a losing battle. The people saw fire from heaven, and it changed nothing. Jezebel still wants him dead. The nation is still compromised. What was the point? God's response is extraordinary. "Go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by." Then a powerful wind tears through the mountains, so strong it shatters rocks. But God is not in the wind. Then an earthquake shakes everything, but God is not in the earthquake. Then fire, the same fire that fell on Mount Carmel, but God is not in the fire. Then a gentle whisper, a still, small voice, barely audible, and there, in the whisper, God speaks. Elijah wraps his face in his cloak and goes out, to the entrance of the cave. The voice asks again, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" Same question. Because God wants him to process this. You've seen me in the dramatic, the public miracles, the fire from heaven. But sometimes I work in the whisper, in the quiet, in the gentle. Elijah repeats his complaint. Same words. "I have been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant, torn down your altars, and put your prophets to death with the sword. I am the only one left, and now they are trying to kill me too." But now God gives him 3 assignments, 3 tasks that will reshape Israel's future. Go back the way you came, and go to the desert of Damascus. When you get there, anoint Hazael king over Aram. Also, anoint Jehu son of Nimshi king over Israel, and anoint Elisha son of Shaphat from Abel-Meholah to succeed you as prophet. And then God corrects Elijah's perception. "Yet I reserve 7,000 in Israel, all whose knees have not bowed down to Baal and whose mouths have not kissed him." You're not alone. You've never been alone. 7,000 faithful people remain. You just couldn't see them in your despair. Depression lies. It tells you you're alone, that nothing matters, that your work is meaningless, and God gently, lovingly corrects those lies with truth. You have work to do. You have a successor to train, and you're part of something much bigger than you realize. Elijah leaves the cave, returns to Israel, and finds Elisha plowing a field with 12 yoke of oxen. This is a wealthy farmer, successful, established, not looking for a career change. Elijah walks up, throws his cloak around Elisha's shoulders, and keeps walking. That's it. No explanation, no sales pitch, just a symbolic gesture, an invitation. Elisha understands immediately. He runs after Elijah. "Let me kiss my father and mother goodbye, and then I will come with you." "Go back," Elijah replies. "What have I done to you?" It's not a rejection. It's a test. Are you choosing this freely, or are you just reacting emotionally? Elisha goes back, slaughters his oxen, burns his plowing equipment, gives the meat to the people. Then he follows Elijah and becomes his servant. The mantle has been passed. The next generation is being prepared. Elijah's work isn't done. It's expanding. The years that follow show Elijah and Elisha working together, confronting evil kings, prophesying judgment, performing miracles. Elisha watches, learns, serves, prepares for the day he'll carry on alone. Then comes the day when Elijah knows his time is ending. God is about to take him, and Elisha knows it too. They travel together from Gilgal. 3 times Elijah tells Elisha to stay behind. 3 times Elisha refuses. "As surely as the Lord lives and as you live, I will not leave you." They arrive at the Jordan River. Elijah takes his cloak, rolls it up, strikes the water, and the river parts. They walk across on dry ground. 50 prophets watch from a distance. They know something momentous is happening. On the other side, Elijah turns to Elisha. "Tell me, what can I do for you before I am taken from you?" Elisha's request is bold. "Let me inherit a double portion of your spirit." Not just the standard inheritance, a double portion, the portion given to the firstborn son. Elisha is asking to be Elijah's primary heir, to carry on his work with even greater power. Elijah responds, "You have asked a difficult thing. Yet if you see me when I am taken from you, it will be yours. Otherwise it will not." They continue walking, talking. Then suddenly a chariot of fire and horses of fire appear. They separate the 2 men, and Elijah goes up to heaven in a whirlwind. No death, no burial, no grave. He's taken, translated, caught up alive into God's presence. Elisha sees it happen. He cries out, my father, the chariots and horsemen of Israel." Then Elijah is gone. Elisha tears his clothes in grief, picks up Elijah's cloak that fell from him, returns to the Jordan. He strikes the water with the cloak and cries out, "Where now is the Lord, the God of Elijah?" The water parts. Elisha crosses. The 50 prophets watching from Jericho bow before him. The spirit of Elijah is resting on Elisha. The mantle has been transferred. The work continues. We're approaching the end of this remarkable story. If you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. I create videos like this every week, diving deep into the human drama behind biblical history. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Now let's talk about what all this means. Elijah's story isn't just ancient history. It's a template for understanding how God works with imperfect people. Look at the pattern. God calls an unknown nobody, gives him an impossible task, provides for him miraculously, uses him to confront evil, allows him to experience crushing depression, meets him in the whisper, gives him new purpose, and ultimately honors him in an unprecedented way. Every part of Elijah's journey reveals something about God's character and how he relates to his servants. First, God uses ordinary people for extraordinary purposes. We don't know anything about Elijah's background. He wasn't from a priestly family, wasn't educated in Jerusalem schools, just a man from a small town who heard God's voice and obeyed. That's encouraging. You don't need credentials, don't need a platform, don't need to be somebody important. God can use a nobody from nowhere to change history. Second, God provides in unexpected ways. Ravens bringing food, a widow's flour that never runs out, bread baked by angels. God's provision often looks different than we expect, unusual, even illogical, but it's always sufficient. Third, God's power is proven in impossible situations. The fire on Mount Carmel wasn't just about defeating Baal worship. It was about demonstrating that nothing is too hard for God. Drenched wood, skeptical crowds, centuries of spiritual compromise. None of it stopped God's fire from falling. Fourth, victory doesn't prevent depression. This might be the most important lesson. Elijah's emotional collapse came immediately after his greatest triumph. That's not unusual. Many people experience depression after major achievements. The letdown, the exhaustion, the realization that external success doesn't fix internal struggles. God doesn't condemn Elijah for his depression. He provides rest, nourishment, gentle presence. Then he redirects Elijah's focus. Fifth, God speaks in whispers, not just in earthquakes. Elijah learned this in the cave. God can work dramatically, but often his most profound communication comes quietly, in the still, small voice that requires us to be silent and attentive. Sixth, we're never as alone as we think. Elijah felt like the only faithful person left. God corrected that perception. 7,000 others remained faithful. The depression had distorted his perspective. Truth restored it. Seventh, legacy matters. Elijah didn't finish everything himself. He trained Elisha, passed on his calling, ensured the work would continue. The greatest prophets don't try to do everything alone. They invest in the next generation. And finally, faithfulness is honored. Elijah didn't die. He was taken. Only 2 people in Scripture experience this: Enoch and Elijah. God honored Elijah's faithfulness in an extraordinary way. But here's the most remarkable part of Elijah's legacy. He appears again, centuries later, on another mountain, with another prophet. When Jesus is transfigured before Peter, James, and John, 2 figures appear with him: Moses and Elijah. Moses representing the law, Elijah representing the prophets, both pointing to Jesus as the fulfillment of everything they proclaimed, and Jewish tradition expects Elijah to return again. The prophet Malachi declared that Elijah would come before the great and dreadful day of the Lord. That's why Jewish families leave an empty seat at Passover for Elijah, waiting for his return. When John the Baptist appeared, Jesus said he came in the spirit and power of Elijah. When Jesus himself performed miracles, people wondered if he was Elijah returned. The prophet who wanted to die in a cave became one of the most enduring figures in religious history. His story has been told for nearly 3,000 years. His name is still invoked. His example still inspires. Because Elijah represents something universal: the struggle between faith and fear, the tension between calling and inadequacy, the journey from triumph to depression to restoration. Every person of faith faces these battles. Moments when God's presence seems overwhelming, followed by moments when God seems absent, times of miraculous provision, followed by times of desperate need. Elijah's story says it's okay to be afraid, it's okay to struggle, it's okay to collapse in exhaustion and cry out to God, because God doesn't abandon his servants in their weakness. He meets them, nourishes them, whispers to them, and gives them new assignments. The same God who sent fire from heaven sends bread in the wilderness. The same God who parts rivers carries prophets in chariots of fire. And the work he begins, he completes, even if it takes generations, even if it requires succession, even if the servant doesn't see the final outcome. Elijah stood alone on Mount Carmel, but he was never truly alone. God was with him. 7,000 faithful remained, and, centuries later, his legacy pointed to the Messiah who would finally and fully restore what sin had broken. That's not just history, that's hope. So what part of Elijah's story speaks to you? Is it the courage to stand alone? The honesty of his depression? The gentleness of God's response? The power of legacy? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read everyone, and your insights help shape future videos. And if you want to explore more of these biblical narratives, the human drama behind the stories we think we know, subscribe to this channel. We're uncovering the real people, the real struggles, the real faith behind Scripture's most powerful accounts. Next week, we're diving into the story of Elisha, the man who inherited the mantle, who performed twice as many miracles as his mentor, whose legacy proves that God's work doesn't depend on one person. Thanks for watching. Remember, God uses ordinary people. He provides in unexpected ways. He speaks in whispers, and he never abandons his servants even in their darkest caves. The story continues, and you're part of it.